You know what nobody warned me about getting older? It wasn't the birthday candles or the reading glasses or even the gray hair that bothered me most. It was standing up from my chair one morning and feeling like my hips had forgotten how to work properly. Maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when you realize your body isn't moving the way it used to, and you can't quite figure out why. Here's something that might surprise you. When your backside feels weaker or flatter than it once did, the real problem often isn't where you think it is. Most folks our age have been told the same thing over and over. Just keep moving, do some squats when you can, take more walks around the neighborhood. And sure, that sounds perfectly reasonable. But what if I told you there's a reason those efforts sometimes feel like you're spinning your wheels? It's not about trying harder or doing more repetitions. It's about understanding something fundamental that happens to nearly everyone as we get older, something that quietly changes how our bodies distribute effort when we move. Research from scientists who study aging and movement has shown us something fascinating as the years go by. We don't just gradually lose muscle tissue, we also lose something called neuromuscular coordination. That's just a fancy way of saying the communication lines between our brain and certain muscles start getting a bit fuzzy. Specifically, some of the deeper muscles around our hips and pelvis, the ones responsible for keeping everything balanced and stable, they tend to go quiet without us even noticing. Studies published in journals focused on aging and physical activity have documented this pattern extensively. When researchers looked at adults over 50, they found that many had developed subtle shifts in how their pelvis sits and moves, especially those of us who spent years working at desks or simply didn't move sideways very much in our daily lives. What happens then is your body, being remarkably clever at survival, starts finding workarounds. Instead of using those deeper stabilizing muscles the way it should, it shifts the work onto your lower back, your knees, and the front of your thighs. You end up working plenty hard, but the effort is going to all the wrong places. The good news, and I mean this sincerely, is that none of this is permanent. Your body hasn't forgotten how to work properly, it just needs a gentle reminder of the right sequence. Before we go further, I'm genuinely curious, where are you right now as you're hearing this? I'd love to know your story. Now here's where things get interesting in a way that might frustrate you at first, but will make perfect sense in a moment. Imagine you've been faithfully doing everything you were told, taking daily walks, maybe doing some squats in your kitchen, consciously thinking about squeezing your backside muscles throughout the day. All perfectly sensible activities. But here's the catch that research has revealed. If those deeper stabilizing muscles aren't firing in the proper order, the other exercises simply can't do what they're supposed to do. In fact, studies from movement science journals discovered that most adults over 50, without realizing it, unconsciously redirect tension away from their hip muscles and into their lower back and thighs during everyday movements. Not because they're doing anything wrong on purpose, but because the foundation isn't stable enough to support the proper pattern. This is why so many well-intentioned fitness efforts seem to plateau, or, worse, leave you feeling stiff and uncomfortable. You're essentially building on top of a foundation that needs attention first. So what's the answer? It's not about grinding through more repetitions or adding weights or finding some complicated new exercise trend. It's about following a smarter sequence, one that respects how bodies actually work as we age. Think of it in 3 natural phases. First, you need to help your pelvis find its proper position again so those hip muscles can actually engage the way they're designed to. Second, you reawaken those deep stabilizing muscles that keep you balanced and supported. Third, only then do you build actual strength and shape in a way that lasts. Let me explain the first piece of this puzzle because it's probably the most overlooked. Your pelvis is essentially the foundation of your entire lower body. When it shifts even slightly out of its ideal position, which happens gradually over years of certain movement patterns or lack thereof, your hip muscles physically cannot activate properly. You could perform countless squats or leg lifts, but if your pelvis is tilted or rotated even just a little, those movements simply bypass the muscles you're trying to reach. This explains why so many people our age say things like their hips feel uneven, or their legs seem to do all the work, or their lower back aches after trying to exercise. It's not weakness, it's misfiring signals. Scientific research on posture and movement has identified a specific pattern that develops over time, especially in people who've spent years sitting or who haven't done much side-to-side movement. This subtle rotation essentially turns off some of those crucial deep hip muscles and creates instability in the hip socket itself. But your body can relearn what it's temporarily forgotten. There's a simple repositioning movement that can help with this, something gentle that creates a very specific rotation to help reset alignment. You start on your hands and knees in a comfortable tabletop position. Then you cross one ankle over the opposite lower leg, which naturally creates a gentle internal rotation that's key to this realignment. Breathing calmly through your nose, you slowly rock your hips back toward your heels, keeping your spine in a comfortable neutral position, no rounding or straining. You pause briefly at the end of the movement, then smoothly return to where you started. The key is performing this slowly and smoothly, roughly 30 repetitions on each side, maybe 2 or 3 rounds, once or twice during your day. This isn't a stretch or a workout, it's more like pressing a reset button. The most common mistake people make is rushing through it or holding their breath, when really this is about calm, controlled movement that allows your nervous system to register the proper pattern again. Once your foundation has been realigned, the next step is making sure it stays stable. Having proper alignment is wonderful, but if it's not stable, you'll still struggle with balance and coordination in daily life. You know those moments when you step off a curb and feel unsteady, or turn quickly and wobble slightly, or carry groceries and feel a bit off balance? Those aren't just random occurrences, they're signals that certain deep hip muscles have gone quiet. These particular muscles don't make your jeans fit better or move heavy objects, but they keep your pelvis level, prevent your knees from caving inward, and stop your spine from overcompensating. Research in journals focused on geriatric physical therapy has shown that when these specific deep hip muscles aren't functioning well, it correlates directly with balance difficulties, increased stumbling risk, trouble standing on one leg, and decreased walking efficiency. The challenge is that regular walking doesn't really reactivate them, and most common exercises barely touch them. But there's a position that does, and it's more accessible than you might think. It's a modified side, lying position where you prop yourself up on one elbow and lift your hips off the floor, creating a stable bridge with your body. While holding that position, you slowly lift your top leg, but only as high as you can manage without twisting your body. Studies measuring muscle activation have ranked this particular movement as one of the most effective for waking up those deep lateral hip muscles, sometimes even more than movements specifically designed for that purpose. When performed slowly and deliberately, just 5 careful repetitions per side can activate muscles you might not have felt working in years. If holding the full position feels too challenging at first, you can modify it by bending your knees. The important part is keeping your body steady, your chest facing forward, and breathing deeply throughout the movement. This bridges the gap between having proper alignment and actually being strong enough to maintain it during daily activities. When you can hold yourself steady without shaking or compensating with other muscles, you're finally ready for the movement that ties everything together. This final exercise might be the most effective single movement for developing real strength and shape in your hip muscles, while also training balance and coordination. It's called a single leg hinge, and while it sounds technical, it's actually quite natural once you understand it. The reason this particular movement is so valuable is that unlike exercises where both feet stay planted, this one challenges your balance and coordination while loading those hip muscles in the specific way that creates the most beneficial changes. It trains stability, hamstring control, and engages your entire posterior chain in a coordinated way that mimics real-life movements like reaching down to pick something up or regaining your balance. Scientific analyses have found that this movement activates all 3 major hip muscles simultaneously at very high levels, often more effectively than squats, lunges, or traditional deadlifts, especially when performed with control